Um, as she mentioned, today is actually the World Right to Die Day. So let's start with, what should I say, a State of the Union here. Our first speaker is the Executive Director of the World Federation Right to Die Societies. This organization was founded in 1980 and consists of 45 Right to Die organizations from 25 countries. So, Peter Warren, the floor is yours.
Stand there, either places.
Okay. So I apologize, I don't speak Norwegian. I speak English most of the time, although I'm from Scotland. And I think you from Oslo know Edinburgh very well, because every year you send over a Christmas tree to Edinburgh, which we parade through the capital, and it's proudly in front of the Castle of Edinburgh. And I can't remember how many years that's happened, but I think it's at least 50 years that that's happened. So we have a connection between Oslo and Edinburgh. And the first piece of news I have for you is good news. The World Federation actually consists of over 60 organizations. I think the last count, we have about 63 organizations in total. There was another 3 organizations who were admitted at the conference in Dublin, just in September there. So we are definitely a growing organization, and that in no small part is actually due to the work of my predecessor. So Dr. Rob Jonquier was the executive director up until the Dublin conference, and he had been for 15 years in that position. And I think it's no understatement to say that in that time, he took the organization from, I won't quite say a kitchen table organization to a boardroom table organization, but he certainly was instrumental in changing the perception of what the World Federation should be and looking ahead what it can be. So, and I can see Yvette's here, and she's like nodding in appreciation. So I've only actually been in the job for, a month, which isn't long at all. So I've kind of been doing my own State of the Union. I've been kind of really looking at what our strengths are, what our weaknesses are, and that process has only just started. Our strength, absolutely, are you guys. Because the World Federation acts like an umbrella. It acts like an umbrella for these 62 organizations around the world. Some of these organizations are huge. They have 250 and 300,000 members. And other organizations are 3 people and 4 people who are deeply committed to changing the law in their country and are just starting on that journey really in isolation. So I suppose if you ask me what I think my mission is, what I think I will bring is moving the organization on from where we are to actually going out to these places where we have very, very small numbers of activists, very small organizations, and bringing them up to try and be like NVVE in Holland with 200,000 members, like Exit Germany that have 250,000 members and so on. I think that's what the World Federation should be doing. I think we should be supporting those places where there isn't legislation, where there should be legislation, and I think that's where I can be of the best help. Yeah. But Anna, when she invited me, and it's very hard to say no to Anna. She said, come and tell your personal story. Everyone has a personal story about how they ended up in this movement, what it was that actually brought them here. And I think the strength, one of the other strengths of our movement, is that the personal stories make things happen. It's actually the stories of things that go wrong that actually push the politicians to change the law. And to be honest, I'm actually no different. For me, where it all began, there's three formidable women here, actually. The woman that's actually getting married there is the third woman. She's Elizabeth. But in the centre, we have an MP. Her name is Margot MacDonald. Some of you might have heard of her. She was a force of nature. She was my boss for 15 years in the Scottish Parliament. I worked in her private office. She was one of the few politicians that was known by her first name. So if you talked about Margot in Scotland, everybody knew who you were talking about. Whether you loved her or hated her, and in equal measure, people loved her and hated her. People knew that she stood for something. She stood for issues that other people wouldn't fight for. So, for example, she saw the problems that working men, working women, prostitutes had, and the hard life they had, and she tried to bring in a law to protect working men and women in the streets, to make safe zones. It was called prostitution safe zones. It didn't get through, but it kind of established her name in the Parliament as someone who was a champion of these kinds of if you like, social issues. She also looked at cannabis. She didn't touch cannabis, but in the 70s and 80s, she had been a journalist, a TV journalist, a radio journalist. She had written on lots of subjects, and she'd written about the AIDS crisis and drugs in Edinburgh in the 1980s, which was awful. And she saw the damage that criminalizing people through the misuse of drugs actually did to them, to their families, to their societies. And she looked at cannabis and thought, actually, cannabis shouldn't be something that you're criminalized for. So she brought forward a bill to try and decriminalize cannabis. Unfortunately, that didn't get through either. And I remember very, very clearly, I was sitting in my office in 2008. It was a Thursday afternoon. It was 5 o'clock. And she decided she was going to go and support one of her colleagues who was talking. We have end-of-day debates, who was talking in a debate on assisted dying. He supported assisted dying. And she said, I think I'm going to go off and I'm going to support Jeremy. It's fine. And I'm working away quietly. Television is on. And the next thing, the speaker called Margot MacDonald. I had no speech. I didn't know she was going to speak. I had no clue that she was about to say what she was going to say. Margot had Parkinson's, she had lymphedema, and she had other comorbidities, which she was very open about, but didn't use them as any excuse for her not to be able to do her job. So when she stood up in this debate and said, I live with Parkinson's, I have lymphedema, I have other maladies that you don't need to know about, and maybe one day I want to have the right to take a handful of pills and a glass of champagne and end my life. Oh my God. Before she had even finished, the phone started ringing. Journalists, because it was Margot, this person, can we have the speech? I won't say exactly what I said. I said, I don't have the speech. She's just said it. Can she come on this television program? Can she come on this radio show? Can she come and write something for us? And within 2 weeks, we had a mailbag like this. We had emails coming in, hundreds of emails coming in. We had people stopping us in the street and saying, you're doing the right thing. Like, good on you, you're doing the right thing. And we sat together in the office afterwards, after about a month, and she said, you know we can't walk away from this. I'm like, yeah, no, we can't walk away from this. And she said, are you ready for the fight? And I said, yeah, I think I'm ready for the fight. And that was that. We began the journey to try and change the law in Scotland. At the start of that journey, we met Dr. Libby Wilson. Dr. Libby Wilson was another force of nature. She was a retired GP from Glasgow. She'd been retired for about 20 years, and she had helped people to end their life. And she was quite open about that. She ran an organisation called Friends at the End. In my research, I discovered Friends at the End and thought, actually, they speak our language. They're the kind of organisation that I would trust, that I think can help us to make good legislation. So we contacted Libby and she came to the office. These two women together were fearsome. They were a fearsome pair of campaigners. At the same time that we started to know Libby, she was arrested. She was 83 years old. She was arrested and taken by the police 6 hours in a police car from Glasgow to the south of England on suspicion of helping someone to die. She was kept in a jail, a prison cell for 6 hours, and then they decided there wasn't enough evidence, so they put her in the car and drove her back to Glasgow. And you know what she said? It really upset me because I couldn't finish the crossword that day. Yeah? She was an amazing woman, an amazing campaigner. And Elizabeth Rennie, someone who grounded me, she was diagnosed with dementia in late 2012. By 2017, she had an advanced dementia. She was taken to a care home. She was actually tricked into going to a care home because at that point she was actually unable to really look after herself, really take care of herself, and her son couldn't take care of her. So more or less we said, you're going on a holiday for a week. And then we took her to the care home, and she was there until 2021 when she died. 2021 was the middle of the pandemic, if you remember the pandemic. And we couldn't visit. We had a phone call. We were told she was dying. And we were told to expect to get a phone call, and we did, and she died. No one could visit her. She was completely alone. She was then taken to the morgue. She was kept in the morgue for 6 weeks. And we had a phone call to tell us, today she's going to go for the cremation. Maybe you want to light a candle at 11 o'clock to remember. What a way to go. She was my mother-in-law, by the way. So that's why I know her. So if I had never been convinced before that we're on the side of right, that we need laws that protect people, that actually allow people to live lives how they want to and end lives how they want to, these three women, for different reasons, have kind of made me the person that I am today, for sure. So there they are. None of them actually have lived to see a change in the law in Scotland, but I'm very, very hopeful that a law is coming. A law is coming. But I want to just kind of address some of the things that I know you as an organisation will be facing as a Right to Die society working in a country where the law isn't changed. Because I was working in a country for 15 years in exactly the same position. So when we started in 2008, we had no law, we had no friends, we had no evidence, we had nothing. We just had the conviction that the law should change. Yep. And it seems like it's overwhelming. It seems like there's so much that needs to be done. Like when Anna talks to me, it's like she has 100 ideas, 100 things that need to be attended to. And all of them are important. But once you start getting into the campaigning, you realize you need to start picking and choosing your fights and starting to pick and choose the things that are really important. And you only learn those through experience. It's impossible for me to tell you, to give you a roadmap and say, this is how you are going to change the law. Because this is Norway, it's not Scotland. It's not Holland, it's not Canada. So ultimately, the way that you're going to change the law is by going through step by step what you need to do to talk to your compatriots, to talk to your legal people, to talk to your medical people, and convince them almost individually that you are right, you're on the right side of history, and you're going to change the law. Give you an example. This is Scotland. Okay. These are all sites that are run by medical associations in Scotland. I don't know if you can see a theme, but you might not be able to see, but the theme is Christianity and God and the God-given right to deliver care. So we actually have the Christian Medical Fellowship. On their website, you have to sign a declaration. You're a medical person, and you sign a declaration to say, I declare my faith in God, Father, the God and the Son, Lord Jesus Christ, and so on and so on. And you're a medical person. And that's where you get your authority to be a medic. Our duty of care is a group of healthcare professionals opposed to the intentional killing of patients by assisted suicide or euthanasia. So our duty of care is another medical organisation that are operating in Scotland. Right to life, standing for society, for human life, value at all stages. Right to life, again, another medical organisation, all backed by religion. And then we have the Catholic bishops, and we know about the Catholic bishops. So when we first started to argue the case, we were trying to argue with all of these people all of the time. And actually, it's futile. It's complete waste of time to argue with these people. These people are at their happiest when you step into their part of the field and argue with them. Because what are you doing? You're wasting your energy. You're wasting your time. You're wasting everything that you should be doing elsewhere, arguing with people who are never going to change their mind. So what I would say is pick your fights carefully, because those who oppose are going to oppose. And we know we're right. You know you're right. Because for all the noise that comes from these medics, that comes from these people who oppose us, 70% of Norwegians have the same opinion as you guys. In Scotland, where those websites are hosted, 77% of my fellow Scots support a change in the law. So whilst we are arguing with that small minority of people and giving them all this oxygen of publicity, 3/4 of the people actually support where we come from. So keep that in mind as well. So pick your fights carefully. Terminology, and Anna's kind of talked about this as well. It's super important. And I have this discussion with my friends in Holland and in Belgium and in Germany and so on. But for English-speaking countries specifically, euthanasia is a really tough word for us. And we just try not to use it. There is definitely connotations of, like, from the Nazi era, from intentional killing of lots of German citizens during the Second World War. So euthanasia is just not a great term for us in English-speaking countries. I fully accept that in non-English-speaking countries, in some non-English-speaking countries, it doesn't have the same weight. All I'll say is that from the World Federation in Toronto in 2022, we adopted a position where we would talk about voluntary assisted dying. Okay, so assisted dying or voluntary assisted dying, anytime you hear someone from the World Federation talking about the subject, that's what we talk about. Okay, so yes, there's kind of all the other terms which are perfectly legitimate, that are quite correct, and can be used. But whenever we're talking about World Federation business, we use the term voluntary assisted dying. So I don't know what runs in Norway particularly.
Change to that, and we've even gotten the doctors. I was going to say it in Norwegian. I det siste debatt, til og med Horn har skjønt at det må være dødshjelp, og han bruker ikke lenger assistert suicidalitet og sånn, så ja, selvmord. Så han har til og med han, så vi har fått den endringen, så vi bør være veldig stolt.
So the next thing that you'll hear from your opponents, and what they try and do is they'll try and isolate you. They'll try and make it sound like you're really weird in Norway because you want to change the law. Like, why are we having this debate? Why are you having this really strange discussion about killing people? And what they try and do is they put it into a bubble and they talk about it as though this is something unique to here. Because we've had the same situation. We had it in Scotland. I'm sure in every country, the opponents try and make it sound like you are unique. You're not unique. There are 31 countries and jurisdictions around the world where some form of assisted dying is now legal. Okay, so you have in North America, you have in South America, in Europe, in Australia and New Zealand, we have different forms of assisted dying legislation which suits each of those countries. They've done the work, they've done the research, and they've produced legislation that works for them. So remember that. So when you come to actually producing your own piece of legislation, in a way, you're fortunate because what you can do is you can go shopping. You can be like a smorgasbord. So you can say, well, actually, we quite like what they do in Canada, but we don't like this. We quite like what we see happening in Holland, but we don't like that. So you're in the position that you have all of this knowledge, all of these laws to draw on to actually make your law fit what you want to happen in Norway. And that's what we did in Scotland. So in Scotland, the law that's actually being put through at the moment, we're talking about unbearable suffering and terminal illness. That's it. We don't talk about 6 months. We don't talk all about the other things. It's terminal illness and suffering. Because we looked at all of that and we decided that's what fits our language. That's what fits what we want to do in Scotland. It doesn't stop the opponents, though. Because what they'll do is they'll say, yeah, but we don't know what's going to happen if we change the law. Or they'll say, well, you can't predict the consequences. And why can't you predict the consequences? The slippery slope. Oh my gosh, the slippery slope. If I saw every person who kind of supported assisted dying, you should all have broken legs and broken arms because this slippery slope that we're all falling down, it doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. There's a couple of examples here I wanted to give you. I know in the UK and Scotland, whenever we were talking about changing the law, the opponents would say, yeah, but they kill babies in Holland, you know. Yeah, they kill babies in Holland. And then in Canada, homeless people are being offered euthanasia. Homeless people are being killed. You have to unpack what's being said to you by the opponents. This thing about the Netherlands, actually, it's supremely sad. It's an awful, awful thing, but it's a thing called the Groningen Protocol. Maybe you can help me with the Groningen Protocol. And in 2005, Dutch pediatric medics took the brave decision that some babies are born so deformed, so ill, that they'll never survive, that they'll never have any quality of life. And this protocol allowed them to be honest and record those deaths properly, rather than doing what happens all over the world, where it happens, but it happens kind of like this. Yep.
Well, if I can add to this, last year there's also some new regulation for children between 1 and 12, which is of the same criteria.
Yeah.
So
Yep. I just wanted to, just because this killing babies thing, but yeah, so in Holland now there's new legislation which, so the babies newly born were covered, and then over 12 years old were covered, but between 1 and 12 there was no law which covered those children. And there was a new piece of legislation passed last year which now covers really the whole of life. But it just kind of shows you the language that's used and how you have to unpack that language to understand what's really going on and what the opponents say about assisted dying. And this thing about homeless people applying for assisted dying, all I'll say is the Canadian law is super robust, and one of the criteria is not that you are homeless. If you are homeless, you will never, ever be qualified for assisted dying. It's not one of the things which you can tick a box and then ask to be assisted. So it's nonsense. It's complete nonsense. So yeah, the slippery slope. You will get very familiar with the slippery slope if you not already are. Once you produce a bill, once you have a piece of legislation in your parliament, your opponents will attack you all the time about this slippery slope. Okay, but the evidence isn't there. There is no evidence. How can we say there's no evidence? Because actually, every single jurisdiction that has a law has really good reporting mechanisms. Okay, so whether you're in Canada with the annual reports, you have the regional euthanasia review committees in Holland. You have in Belgium, every 2 years, you have a report in Belgium. In Oregon, there's 30 years of reports. Every year there's a report. It's impossible to say that there's a slippery slope because everything is there. Everything is actually in black and white for you and I and everyone else to read. So don't get sidetracked about the slippery slope. I don't want to run over too much because I know it's kind of whatever. But I just wanted to do a little promo. Today is World Right to Die Day, 2nd of November. The World Federation has tried to adopt that day really as ours. And this year, I helped put together 3 webinars. So one which is Dr. Lou Cohen from the USA, one which is Fernando Marin and Lina Negrete from Colombia. And the other one is Tina McCafferty, who is CEO of Tatora Hospice in New Zealand, and she's in conversation with a neuroscientist in Australia. They're all talking about dementia, okay? And I suppose the final thing I'm going to leave you with is what's the World Federation going to be doing in the next year? What am I going to be doing in the next year? I kind of identified at the conference, Janie, hello Janie, I identified at the conference that dementia was one of the big topics. It was a hot topic. All our organizations are grappling and will continue to grapple with this issue. It's not going away. And whether you're in a jurisdiction like Canada or the Netherlands or Belgium, which in very, very particular circumstances will allow for a dementia patient to access an assisted death, it's a tiny, tiny proportion of the total deaths each year, assisted deaths each year. And I really want the World Federation next year to be part of the conversation. And what I really hope to do is next year build on these webinars and actually do some live webinars, and perhaps at the end of next year even try and do a dementia conference. Okay, so watch this space. And I'm really sorry, Anna, I really overran. I just want to leave you with this. Can I just leave you with this, please? In 2010, we brought forward a bill in Scotland. It was defeated by 85 votes to 15. In 2015, we brought a bill to Scotland. It was defeated by 82 votes to 36. We have a bill today in Parliament, and if it was voted today, it would pass. It's in process now, and we know we have more than 65 MPs who will support. We need 65. We think we have 80 members in support. So it's definitely worth the journey. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Det noen spørsmål, helt presise spørsmål til han før Peter is going, we have the time, even though we figure it out. Men det jo bare sånn, hovedbudskapet her var jo at personlige historier det som kan føre til endringer, og de som alltid imot, de vil alltid være imot, because you mentioned that those who oppose will always oppose, so don't use your energy on those people. But isn't that very pessimistic?
No, it's very positive.
Don't you manage to convince them?
You're never going to convince them. I promise you, it's futile. It is futile. Do not waste your energy.
Even though you have good arguments.
They don't care.
Yeah. That's the message. Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.